looking for the link, so I'm emailing them as we speak.
How come there are two Susan screens?
Oh, Peter. There is only one Susan, I can assure you. This one here, where I'm looking at you and saying hi, is my telephone.
Right.
Because the camera on my laptop has decided to go to sleep.
Oh,
So
I see.
but just so I can see everybody properly and not have to, you know, worry about just looking at you and keep doing this on the screen here.
Got it.
I've got the laptop on. But thanks for asking. There is truly only one of me, but I can see one of Anne now as well. Morning, Anne.
Hello,
Or afternoon.
Fabulous,
Hello.
Anne.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you.
You're welcome. The reminder did go to your Gmail email address, but technology sometimes tries us all, doesn't it? So
I've lost a few Zoom things.
Anyway, I'm glad that everyone has managed to get in, and now is time to officially sort of welcome you all. We've been having a wonderful conversation. Isn't it cool that we can be all over the world and still come together to have a conversation? And I'm delighted today that my guest is Susan Furness. Susan and I have been, we've been friends for a very long time, but over the last 7 weeks, I think it is, Susan, 7 weeks, we have been creating a program called Strategic Heartistry. And we've been running that program now with people in other various parts of the world. What a cute dog there, Cecilia. We've just been, it's been a delight. We created the whole thing here on Zoom. And as I say, we're working with the first groups of people currently. So it's been a wonderful experience. And I think what has been a delight, Susan, has been how warmly this program of ours has been received. And we've called it an alternative to strategic planning. So Susan, thanks so much for being available to have this conversation, first of all, but maybe that's the place to start. What's strategy and what's strategic heartistry?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, good place to start, isn't it? Might as well start at the beginning and sort of unpick those two words. So yes, thank you, Ian. And indeed, yes, let me also honour that just what an enjoyable few weeks it's been co-creating this with you. You know, when indeed, you know, it's also been interspersed and nudged by, you know, anxiety and loss and, you know, all the unknown that's been happening in the world around us with family and friends. So it's been really wonderful to have this connection with you, Ian, that's been, you know, a real foundation, a real springboard as well, but a foundation that has springs. So let's take those two questions, shall we? What is strategy? Ooh, wow. Given that I'm supposed to be somebody that knows about strategy for the last 30 years, I can all tell you one thing, I've never quite got what it is, but here we go. What I do feel into, Ian, that it's actually about trying to get from here to there. And that it's often a very linear process, just from my observations in the past. And I'll drop in some little phrases as I'm speaking. You know, I find truth in observation, not opinion, and particularly carrying that essence into this new world. So my observation of the past is it's very often very linear. It's often doing something, and that doing, if you put the phrase by doing something. So an objective, and I like to say an objective is an intention, as you know, Ian, but an objective is to do something, and you've got some numbers to it and some quantifiables. An old era strategy is by doing something, often linear, and therefore often structured, masculine, more yang in energy. And often, I've noticed, I've observed, it doesn't take into account levels, stages, and states of what else is going on outside that particular strategic plan. It can give lip service to it, but it often doesn't integrate it. Whereas you asked as well, what's the difference with strategic heartistry? Well, strategic heartistry really does carry a lot more fluid energy, a lot more, therefore you could call that feminine or yin energy, but it integrates it. Strategic heartistry, strategy, heartistry integrates it beautifully with the yang and the linear. And so you get that really juicy bit in the middle where you really do appreciate what's going on in the grey matter, you know, that middle bit where all juiciness can happen. And what strategic heartistry encourages us to do is to go from here to here, because we're always here, aren't we? We never quite get there because there becomes here. And what we do therefore in that is we're able to talk into the moment. We're able to talk in before we talk out. And that's both into ourselves and into the team, the organization or the family, because we're all here. And how we do that, and what one of the practices of that is listening to the heart, Ian, before talking to the head. So rather than going straight to the head, right, what do I know? What's the research? What's the secondary research? Let's do a focus group. Oh my goodness, what's going on out there? How does this strategy work? Particularly so we're in the place now of being here to get here, and actually can only sense where we're going because we don't know anymore, do we? Then if we talk into the heart first, Ian, and then have a little word with the head, we can then generate what strategic heartistry really suggests it can do. And that is connecting the heart with the head, with the hands, and then to those plans. So Ian, it calls the heart to work. Over to you.
Fabulous, fabulous. And you would, and I will send folks some links. A lot of my work in the heart leadership space is based on the scientific research done by the folk at Heart Math. And there's a wonderful thing called the Heart Experience that's available free of charge at the moment. So if folk are interested, I will send that to you, and that will link you up to what is now decades of research that talks about how the heart is first. We actually respond with our hearts way before our heads. And the research
that would be wonderful to have that link, Ian.
So yeah. I'll put that available for people. And there's a number of books written by the Heart Math people. And just so
Can
you know,
you made me think of something there.
Yeah, just so you know, folks, if you're not used to our format, I've got a series of questions that I'm going to put to Susan just to give a bit of a sequence to our conversation. But feel free to raise your hand and ask a question, join in the conversation at any point. Susan.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you so much for mentioning the heart map. And I just wanted to say something else that popped into me there in the moment about the difference between strategy and strategic heartistry, is that strategy really is the motion of and the deliberate attention to survive, whereas strategic heartistry is a deliberate practice about being in rhythm with thriving. So it's this now new relationship with profit and purposeful profit, survival, profit and growth, and thriving, purposeful profit, and a collective magnificence. Over to you, Ian, and thank you.
And it's been interesting, hasn't it? When we were doing our research and creating the program, folks, we come up with this phrase to underpin this idea of strategic heartistry, that the heart, we hear the heart first. Actually, the magnetic energy of the heart is some 80,000 times stronger than the brain, according to some of the research that I've looked at. We actually have a magnetic field that's, has been referred to in the past as aura. And I find it fascinating because the research suggests that it goes about 1 meter. The magnetic field is about 1 meter from the body, which is interesting when you consider social, or it should be called physical distancing. That's 1.5 meters away. So literally people are outside of our heart energy. which is fascinating. But we had this phrase, didn't we, Susan, we've introduced in the groups that we've worked with so far. I've loved this phrase. We call it talking in before talking out. Tell us more, Susan.
Yeah, wow. I'm so pleased you brought that up so early in the conversation, Ian, because talking in before we talk out is something that I've been really in practice myself for over a decade and a half. And that really, and then now bringing that into workplace really is about talking in to ourselves and to the organization before we talk out to the marketplace. So really connecting or in fact, as we say in Strategic Heartistry, and being deliberately human, right? So really talking in before we talk out to both ourselves and to the marketplace. And what that does, in my experience over these many years, is it really brings, I'll use a little hashtag here, hashtag collective individualism. And because, of course, some of you will know in some aspects of business, particularly communications and marketing communications, often that message goes out, or has done in the previous era, goes out to the market before we've even spoken to our audiences inside, our internal team, and let everybody know. And in fact, Kim, I can see your video on now. Look, I mentioned your name just as you're blowing your nose, but Kim has a wonderful book. She's the author of a book called The Right Kind of Loud. And Ian, this speaks right into talking in before you talk out. And one of the right kind of loud moments, actually, listen to this, is the sound of silence. And how powerful is that sound of silence as we go in? And indeed, back to marketing communication plans, often it's good to have some silence in those plans. So talking in before you talk out actually speaks as well to my practice and my holding on to a very special position as a coach in spiritual intelligence. And in spiritual intelligence, so IQ, physical intelligence, PQ, emotional intelligence, we've probably heard of. Now, spiritual intelligence really is the ability to practice having compassion and wisdom with you at all times. And so really meaning, so you don't lose it when the strategy isn't going right. So that speaks truly into the here in Strategic Heartistry. Ian.
And in heart language, of course, we would call these the regenerative qualities of the heart. So what I'd like to do is just, if everyone could just place your hand on your heart. What you're feeling is a unique rhythm that belongs only to you. And these kind of conversations, we design them to really help you to get in touch with that unique rhythm. There's never been a person who's walked the earth before who had exactly this rhythm that you're feeling now. About 100 billion people have walked planet Earth, as far as we know, never been a duplicate. And it's this uniqueness that we try to tap into in this conversation, because when we're able to have a conversation heart to heart, then magic happens. And I can just see the wonderful looks on some of your faces and the nods that this kind of conversation resonates with you. So I wonder what's going on for you. What are folks hearing in their hearts right now? Please share with us. We only have one rule around sharing. We keep it brief, but other than that, we welcome your thoughts, your feelings, perhaps more than your thoughts.
Cecilia. Mute Cecilia. Yeah.
Yes. Good morning from Dubai. But, well, I must admit that my heart right now is a little bit restless. So I think maybe it's about, times I have 3 school, online learning, Corona, no summer plans, staying here in the heat. Yeah, I'm a bit restless. I can just.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that, Cecilia. And so let's honour that space, and back to #collective individual. I would guess you're in great company, Cecilia, that there are others also feeling a little restless. But let's take that word. It's 2 words, rest and less. So I would just honour that we sort of think about vocabulary, and vocabulary is very important to talking in before you talk out, particularly then into your organisation, because of course, as we know, I can see Anne nodding, that words give us what we call a felt shift. And so if we start to nurture some new vocabulary for the AC period, the after Corona period, that we, and sort of, it's got the same sort of general meaning and definition as a word we may have used with teams or family in the BC, the before Corona period, but it's going to give us a whole different right kind of loud to use Kim's nuance of words again. And so restless, I would just invite you to sit in with that, Cecilia, and any of you collective individuals who might be feeling the same, that, what we can do, does that mean we need less rest? Or does it mean that actually I need some more rest? Or indeed, what is rest all about in this DC time, this during Corona time? Yeah. And indeed, we have another less, don't we, Ian, in our dictionary? We have fearless, the fearless leader. So we can talk to that a little bit in a minute, Cecilia, and see how that works. Ian, thanks for that.
It's been very interesting, hasn't it, Susan, when we've talked to folks doing the program about fearless leadership, people have really had unusual responses to it. In fact, I recall you honoured someone by telling them that they were fearless, and they were quite uncomfortable with.
Oh gosh, yes,
yes,
thank you. Yeah, thank you for reminding me that. Indeed, Ian and I very early on in this journey together started playing around with the lovely zest of vocabulary and just how different words, like the polarity of a word, here's the word on this side and here's the word on this side, can give a whole different meaning. And that's where we came with fearless and fearful. And so I did honour Ian, and 3 or 4 people, but one comes to mind right now. And I said, my goodness, this is somebody that's running schools in the United Kingdom, private Montessori schools. And of course, 104 children means 208 parents, which means 416 grandparents, and of course it's the adults that were in the restless, fearful state, and the kiddie winkies were, really raring to go with whatever new environments were coming their way. And so I did say to that principal, that leader, wow, you have been so fearless in all of this. You've really shown up as a fearless leader. That's the last thing I feel like. And actually, just by saying it, it pulled in a real undertone of fear. And that brought Ian and I to breaking down the word fear, didn't it, Ian? And you're going to love this, King, I think, as well. FEAR. Take it out. Ear, listening, active listening. Again, an invitation to talk in before we talk out. And so when we start then looking in, shall I go into how we sort of meshed around the beauty and the essence of a fearless leader? Is this a great time for that?
I reckon I see nods and smiles, so it sounds appropriate.
Okay, wonderful. So I mean, one of the key things that really brought a lift to Ian and I was this ability to find your voice in a world that desperately wants to hear you. Right, so this could be a real certain call, we are the world, we are the people. Heed the certain call, so that we can now really use this bridging period of DC during Corona and nudge us into really turning up and making a big change. Woo! But that needs us to be fearless, doesn't it? So, what's a fearless leader? I mean, Ian, I've got sort of about 4 points here that you and I have mooted over the weeks. And one is that you know that you are looked after, that someone has always got your back because you are working as one. Like you're talking in, you're working from here to here, and you really bring out the ability to be decisively human. And of course, one of our lines, Ian, is being decisively human in a digitally connected world. Because as you said earlier, Ian, that brings a whole new set of nuances, correct?
Yeah.
And it also, it also is that we in talking in before we talk out, and in this experience and restlessness that we felt, and this anxiety, etc., we perhaps in DC have the practice, the time and the space to realize that this is an opportunity to thrive, because this is an infinite game. It's not a finite game. And that this time during Corona is actually the presence of a gift. Do you get that? Presence of a gift. And so a fearless leader, Ian, we're noticing, is one that's really, really, really feeling into this DC time as a gift. And actually, instead of calling it unprecedented, which isn't a word we've all seen mooted around, maybe feeling into it as a curious time, not an unprecedented time. It's a curious time where we can sense instead of know. And of course, sense, Ian, then brings us back to a real practice that we can do, and that is to practice our intuition as opposed to our instincts of knowing. And that's sort of working very beautifully together, the gut, the ego, and the intuition. Ian, over to you.
I think it's very interesting. I think I was saying to a group I was online with this morning, I think this is the most exciting time since January the 10th, 1438.
Go on, tell us what happened.
Well, that was about the time that the early seedings of the Renaissance began. That was about the time that where Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo were walking the streets of Florence, and new ideas were beginning to take place. And I suspect that the Zoom rooms of 1438 in those early days were, incredible places where people gathered to talk about the new world, because in those days, the world was dominated by religion and politics. How interesting. And the folk of the Renaissance decided that we're not going to take this anymore. We're actually going to build a new world. It was the beginning of what's now called the scientific revolution. But in that Renaissance, so many great things happened. There was also all sorts of things that caused this, kind of slow down. And I agree with you, Susan. This is just a wonderful gift. This is the most. I've been involved in this kind of work for over 30 years. This is the most exciting time by a long stretch. I've never been so excited in my life. I'm like a little child in the lolly shop every day, because this is just a wonderful opportunity. Peter and I have been having this conversation many times, haven't we, Peter, as well? And so here we are on the precipice of the greatest change that's happened in 500 years. There couldn't be anything more exciting, could there, folks?
There couldn't, but you've made me think of one wonderful similarity using Leonardo and Dali and whoever, as an example. And I was just talking last night to Dr. Judy Neal, the author of a book called Edgewalkers that you may want to look at, edgewalkers.org. And we were talking about how about our conversation around magnifying essence, Ian. I'm going to ask you to sort of talk a little bit about that in a minute, although I know it's my interview, but you've got such great things to say about that. But just going back to what you said, what happened in 1438 with these great Renaissance masters, is that they would channel and zone, get into a zone. And often, you know, those artists of whatever art, I mean, that could be strategic art as well, which is where we are with strategic artistry, is that you're zoning in, as you're talking in before you talk out, you're zoning in. And if you can do that with your team, you know, by role modeling and provoking acts of love and kindness, that in turn provoke other acts of love and kindness, that then create this energy of purposeful profit that is built to thrive and not survive. How wonderful. But now let's just go back to Zoom. So we've gone from zone in the Renaissance of 1438. We've gone to the wonderful gift of Zoom during the DC period. And we're now talking about practicing the art of talking in before we talk out, so that we can bring the heart into play. So we're almost going back into zone of the 1438 Renaissance. So how do we practice? How do we generate as a collective in that zone? Particularly when we're in the zone of our family, where there could be some disruption going on, or in the zone of our workplace. And dare I say it, oh, what joy, you know, in the zone of creating the new, the next, where we are carrying with us luggage instead of baggage, because now we can leave some of that old behind, but pluck out what might serve us as we're going into AC, which of course is there to be here very soon. Over to you, Ian, and maybe something around magnificence and essence.
Well, we could spend a long time on that, but just let me say that essence is your difference-making personal significance. The reason that you're alive and breathing is that you're here to make a difference. And you've already made a difference. Each and every one of you've already made a difference today. Even Kim, are you still in your pajamas? even if you are, you've already made a difference today. And that's why you're breathing. That's why your heart is beating, because you're here to make a difference. And that's your essence. That's where your essence comes in. And your essence is that unique piece of you that is your difference-making significance. I'm in the business of helping you to see that, unearth that, but more magnify and enhance it. That's really what our work is about, Susan, isn't it? It's about helping you to see your magnificence. Interesting, when we break down words, of course, magnificence, essence is in there.
That's absolutely right. It's right in there. Yeah.
And when you take fearless and you take the two, it's fearless. And I can tell you that I think we have a lot of positive reasons to fear less, even though there's a lot of chaos going on in the world at the moment, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere. But I suspect that this is the chaos before the great shift. You and I, Susan, have talked about this being a nudge, but I reckon the nudge is becoming a shove. And it's the shove before the shift, I'm saying to people.
That's beautiful, Ian. Really, really wonderful. And
Folks,
I just
other thoughts. I can see a lot of Peter.
Anne.
Peter, I can see your mind. Anne, there's a hand. What are you hearing yourself say to yourself, Anne?
Well, I'm saying to myself that I love your phrase, Susan, calling the heart to work. Absolutely divine, superb. The other thing I'd say is that this conversation is just so much about words and vocabulary, and again, awesome. I mean, in the area in which I seem to have found myself focusing, mental health, just the words we use, the way we continue to create stigma. And to your point, Ian, around this may be that moment before the significant change. I think about it as the chaos when you're so close to breakthrough and you really actually want to give up because you're so close to it. It's so chaotic. It's so terrifying what you're trying to do. And you've just got to hang in there and go that last 5% because that's when it happens. And I think, to your point, that at last, people may start to understand mental health is important now. You know, it's such an opportunity. And to your point, Cecilia, about being restless and that whole action of doing something, can I tell you today, for the first time, my heart is not restless. And why? Because I just booked 2 flights, 2 trips to go diving. And so I am so happy. I can't tell you. So find something you can do to settle your heart. That's it.
A little gem, if I may. One of the words for essence, the metaphors for essence that I love is song. The song, music, voice. They're all metaphors for your essence. And This Is the Moment is the song that I'm really thriving in. And it says, the second verse of the song, This Is the Moment, it says, this is the moment, this is the time when the momentum and the moment are in rhyme. Give me this moment, this momentous moment, and I'll gather up my past and I'll make some sense at last. The third verse, this is the moment when all I've done, all of the dreaming, scheming, and screaming become one, because this is the day, just see it shine, when all I've lived for becomes mine.
That's beautiful, Ian. And that sort of offers an invitation to you all, let's say post our event today, post our gathering, to think about what's the song in your heart, what song really needs to be sung. Yeah. And of course, we know that DC during Corona, that the birds came out to sing, amplified to a volume that hasn't been heard for a long, long time, many said. And not only that, the dolphins came into play in the city waterways, for example, in Venice, that are now clean. So yeah, Ian, beautiful. Let's think about what song we have in your heart. And indeed, the Stylistics, you didn't know I was going to say this, had one that I love, which is stop, look, listen to your heart, hear what it's saying. And I think Diana Ross did a version as well. So stop, look, listen to your heart, hear what it's saying. Wonderful. Ooh, we could have a little choir, Kim.
What is it saying to folks? Peter, I see you either in contemplation or making lots of notes. Peter's a psychologist, pal of mine for a very long time. Peter, we've had a lot of conversations about this kind of thing, but what are you hearing yourself say to yourself at the moment?
I was doing the crossword, Ian. Oh God. For once, I don't have lots to say. You know, people who know me say once I get on a roll, I won't shut up. But I'm just sort of making a few notes to reflect on later. So I think, doesn't someone say, you know, most people die with their song still in their heart? You know, it's that willingness to express what's in you. And I like the thing that was said earlier. I don't know if it was Susan said about or was it you, Ian, said you find your voice in a world that needs to hear it. Who said that?
Yeah, that's Susan early on. It's a
But
lovely.
I really like that concept, because I think most of my life I've not fully expressed what I had in me, thinking that I would be wrong, or people wouldn't care, it wouldn't be of interest to people or value to people, or who am I to even say that, it's already been said, and that kind of thing. And it's just having the courage to say what's there for you, and then when you realize that what you've said or shared actually resonates with other people. And I think as a professional speaker, I've gotten better at that in more recent times, is to just be wholly human, and then people see a connection and say, oh gosh, I thought it was just me that felt that way. But it takes a lot of courage and vulnerability to actually just be completely who you are, because there'll be people in the world who might not respond the way you would hope, but there are people out there who will, and it's those people you need to speak for.
Indeed.
That's
Susan.
all I have to say.
Well, Peter, I mean, really beautiful. And can I just pick up on some of your vocabulary there? And I'll start with vulnerability, and just suggest to you all that the value of vulnerability is immense when we can give it a new vocabulary, and then eventually a glossary. And then to honor your word of courage, and the beauty of that word courage, which actually is a skill that we can practice together in strategic artistry. But
And
that word,
the word is the heart.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Peter. Isn't it gorgeous?
Yes.
The core.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us? Yeah, that's right, Ian. Which one wants to tell us about the origin of the word courage? Core.
You go,
Peter?
Susan. You're featuring today, so you go.
Okay. So, but thank you both for saying that and honouring it. So those of you that may or may not know that, and I'm not a French speaker particularly, but in French, coeur, I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly, is the heart, Peter, as you probably know. And courage is that's where we get, it's the heart age. It's time to bring the heart to work. And strategic heartistry and the fearless leader ensures that it's warm hearts and cool heads that come to work. So thank you so much, Peter. And Jamie, I don't want to pick on you, but you are nodding away there, Jamie. What's it saying to you?
You remember this mute? Oh, no. Well, it hits you in the heart. You know, it just makes you think. You know, you listen to what Ian and yourself are saying, and you write down some key words or key sentences, and then when you hear from Anne and Peter and others, it's a space where you know you want to be. It comes to how can you get there, either in your personal space or in your employment space, and it's hard to lead that in my employers. 280 odd people all around Australia, so it's sort of in a lot of remote areas. So it's hard. Just trying to think of how I can portray that, and I lead from that space, as Ian would know, that hard space, but how I push that wider and get some more disciples, most importantly, and not get caught up in the moment and the time.
Ian, can I pop in and support Jamie a little bit there?
Yeah, you
and
go.
all of us, actually. I mean, why don't I just sort of talk just about 3 tangibles that the strategic heartistry model, or here we go, vocabulary again, Jamie, modeling brings. So if we think of a model as an old era, more linear, masculine structure, and now we think of the new era, AC, and Heartistry is bringing in modeling, and we are indeed the role models. So modeling being much more generative, much more organic, not fixed. Doesn't mean to say it doesn't know what it's servicing, but it's not fixed. It's not fixed to a strategy or an objective, but it's got a very clear, purposeful intention. And to support, Strategic Heartistry has various modelings that Ian and I have birthed with such wonder. I'll get to you, Anne. One is 5 R's, and we have 5 R's. Anne, can somebody not hear me, maybe?
I think Anne had
leaving.
Anne had to go.
Oh,
so,
leaving. Oh,
yeah.
God bless Anne. Bye, bye, bye. So here, I'll just say to you again. So here's some models. We've got 5 R's. There's a 5R model that just goes through the reality, the reason or the purpose, the recipe, that would be your strategies, the rituals, another word for tactics, and the rhythm, as Ian and I have been speaking to, as opposed to the critical path and the timeline, but the rhythm, obviously all pointing to the new reality or the intention. And as Ian likes to call it, and I love this, possibility leadership. So where are we going? Because actually we may not get there, right? Because what we've learned during Corona is we don't even know what's happening in the afternoon, right? So we're only sensing where we're going. So if we're going here to here, what joy does that bring? So we've got the 5R models. We've also got something that we call Mother, which is a glossary or vocabulary that we've all been enjoying today. So we've got some words that are BC, before Corona. We've got some words that have emerged during Corona, DC. We've started populating our AC, but of course, AC is your vocabulary, your glossary for your decisively human leadership of your family and your team and your community. And it's such a fabulous place to be. So Peter, Jamie, vocabulary, how we say things is wonderful. And I'm sure Ian and you can do some juicy work around that. And out of that, when it comes to now communicating to the wider marketplace, is to capture some of that in a glossary. So it almost is like the project, the organization, the cluster team have their own song, right? And the glossary is the lyrics to that song. And it's really, really quite a wonderful exercise in modeling that Ian and I lead in Strategic Heartistry. So I hope that helps Jamie and everybody else. Peter.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch back on the vulnerability piece, because this is an area that fascinates me. And the one TED talk that I most recommend to people and I most talk about is The Power of Vulnerability by Brené Brown, which is the 4th most ever watched TED talk at around 44 million views. And the reason her talk went viral is it speaks to all of us. When I touch on the topic of vulnerability with audiences, because we're talking about the concept of stepping out of our comfort zone. So we all reside in a circle that's our comfort zone. It's the world we know. We like it in there because things are predictable. We understand things. It's kind of orderly, whereas outside is unknown. It's chaos. It's a world that we don't understand. And we're faced with a choice between staying in our little circle, which essentially we're trapped. We have a mindset, a view of how things are or should be, and we're trapped by that. But the minute we step outside into the unknown, which is very much the world we're in now, we're facing so much uncertainty, is we feel vulnerable. And it's really, really interesting, because whenever I'm speaking with an audience and I say the sentence and they finish it, they always say the same word. To be vulnerable is to be, I pause, and people 99% of the time say weak. So that tells me that in our culture, vulnerability and weakness are seen as synonymous. And that's very telling. And so what we have to do is pull that apart. And that's why Brené Brown's talk is so, the title of the talk in itself, it's the power of vulnerability. And
interesting, Peter, this is where the heart comes into play. Also, as a quick aside, Brené Brown's featured on Facebook in the last 24 hours, where she wrote a beautiful piece about, she said, the system isn't broken. It's how it's designed to be, and we need to break it. It was a wonderful,
Right.
wonderful piece. But
Yeah, I'll check that out.
one of the interesting things about this in terms of vulnerability is we're coming out of a head world,
Yeah.
and the head's about thinking, the head's about replaying the stories we've taught it. So the head thinks. The big difference is the heart knows.
Yeah.
The heart knows, the head thinks. And when you get comfortable with the fact that your heart knows, you become brave enough or have the courage enough to step out into that wider circle.
So the thing about the vulnerability is that it's where we connect, because the word vulnerability comes from wound. So we're all wounded, and it's our wounds that actually connect us. If we come from the heart, it's where we connect. So, for example, I mean, this morning somebody just posted on Twitter, because it's the Twitter sphere has gone crazy with all of the stuff going on in the world. But someone played a clip of a policeman in the US with tears in his eyes, saying people are not understanding what we're having to deal with every single day. And I'm having to go to a drive-by shooting where a 5-year-old girl has been killed, and I have to go into that. I have to endanger my life to try and sort that out. And it was this almost compassion, because we've got the image of a policeman murdering someone, but to see a connection at a heart level with somebody who's on the front line every day dealing with this seemingly intractable problem. So I have a friend
So Peter, I'll take you there. I mean, this is, I would just, because it's such wonderful, wonderful content you're giving. And there's a couple, if I might just take it there and
sure.
Just offer again, the V's. So we talked a little earlier with your steer and your contribution about the value of vocabulary. And indeed, if we were here for a lovely practice all day on strategic artistry, we wouldn't indeed, Peter, be practicing together how to unleash that value of vulnerability. And here, there's so much in it. And I want to take some of your C's. You're bringing up a lot of C's today. And I'll remind Ian that Anne's not on the call now, but when we had that wonderful call with Anne and Gary and Glenn, Ian, about 3 months ago, Glenn captured a whole list of C's that came up during the conversation that our group here might enjoy. We'll send you those. But you've talked about circle, about courage, about curiosity, and you talked about comfort zone, Peter. So, and just now we talked about, with Ian, unleashed us to thought about 1438 and about the zoning of those Renaissance masters and how they channeled and how we've bridged all the way to where we are now, and how Zoom has helped us get into zones together. And so what I'm just going to take you here then is, how about in Artistry, we actually move from comfort zone, which is an oxymoron, right? A bit like strategic planning, may I suggest, and move it into the creative zone, right? So we still use that zone from 1438. We bounce it into where you were going, Peter. We mush it up with all of the gorgeousness of Brené Brown and all the other wonderful speakers from the edge that are now moving towards another C, and that's the center. So thank you so much for bringing that in. And Ian, may I bounce it back over to you?
Well, yes, and I'm just conscious that we promised that we've only got 10 minutes to go. So just conscious of that. We don't mind going a couple of minutes over. We do try, because there is such a thing as Zoom fatigue. And I appreciate, it's very early in the morning in the UK, and it's in the evening in other places. But so just a little reminder, we don't mind going a couple of minutes over, but we are keeping an eye, and we like to keep to zone. But one of the things that Susan and I, we spent a lot of energy and many hours of conversation because it was this idea of connection. And we described it, didn't we, Susan, as connecting hearts and heads and hands to plans. And maybe that's a good kind of place for us to go. And this was during a time when we were playing with yin and yang and deciding how ebb and flow was going to work when we facilitated the program together. me being very much ebb, Susan being very much flow. We both do both, but we had to work hard, didn't we, Susan, to get this right, to get the ebb and flow right. And one of the things that helped us was this idea that it is a human connection. And we had a gift from one of our early participants who said it's about being decisively human in a digitally connected world, which was such a blessing. But from that gift from that person flowed to this idea of connecting hearts and heads and hands to plans. Susan, that's probably a good place to bring us home for a bit of a landing.
Well, thank you, Ian. I mean, is anything coming up for you, any specific question that you'd like me to address, or shall I just take what comes in?
I think take what comes in, but it's this idea of, you know, connection, because here we are technically able to connect with anyone, anywhere, anytime, almost, and yet we've never been so disconnected as a human race in history. So
Hi,
Kim, yeah. And
Hi.
Simone might want to speak.
Hello,
Oh,
everybody.
I don't. Oh, okay.
So
Somebody else
Kim,
is
Kim
speaking
first,
also.
then Simone.
Yes. Well, I just wanted to contribute before our beautiful circle ends. So I'm going to throw myself into something. And I think when it comes to heart connection, what I find very touching with this time is that one of my guidelines is this serenity prayer. You know, God give me the courage to change what I need to change, the patience to accept what I need to accept, and the wisdom to know the two. That's kind of my personal guideline. And when I look at the Western world and the mindsets that we're operating with, for me, what I see is very often that the problem is that there's no humbleness. There's no, that whole part of acceptance has been very undercover. You know, like, you know, I have the right, there's a lot of entitlement. I have the right to have this, I have the right to have this and this and this. So in this moment that we're in, suddenly we're forced into having acceptance, which I actually think is good for us. And then, so I just find that very healthy, I think. I mean, there's a lot of suffering, and I'm very privileged sitting here in a beautiful home, and I'm not sick, and so I'm just very aware of that. But at the same time, I love to see that, you know, we are in this. And then where the compassion and the heart comes in is we are actually dependent on that we are caring about each other. And it's such a tactile way. Like, if you don't care about me, I'm going to die from it. It's actually like this very palpable interdependence. And when it comes to touching our hearts, I just think that's it's a very strong bond that is actually forced upon us. And then, of course, we have all kinds of different reactions and moods and law enforcements and peaks and lows. But, you know, this thing that we are, that this part of the acceptance, and I've been practicing acceptance for many years, so that's not new to me. And I'm watching now that a lot of people are kind of thrown in, and I find that fascinating and I think healthy. And we are forced into interdependence, which has always been there, but now it's become palpable. So I just find that very inspiring.
Very beautiful,
Yeah, wonderful.
Kim, and I'm
Thank you,
so
Kim.
pleased that you popped in. And I'm just going to offer some more C's, Peter,
Just
in answer to that.
Simone first. I think Simone.
Yeah, let me just finish this bit because it's one thing, otherwise I'll get it for just answering to Kim's C's. And then Simone, it's all yours. We're really thrilled to hear from you. But it's just these C's that just to consider that in this place that we have an opportunity for common unity, born out of common sense, for common purpose. And if we look at the word community and join it together, common unity and join it together, we get community. So I'll just leave you with that one. And thank you for allowing me that space, Ian. And let's offer over to Simone. Hi, Simone.
Hi. Actually, it wasn't me that put my hand up.
Okay. Sorry, Simone.
No, that's all right. I'm actually, as Ian knows, I'm actually quite a vocal person in these type of forums. And I think for myself, I'm really sitting in the discussion. By sitting in the discussion, I myself am really just I guess letting my heart receive all of the content. And I think for myself as well, I'll be probably sitting and receiving this content well and truly in the next 3 to 4 days after this discussion has been completed.
What a lovely thing to say. Thank you for saying it, Simone.
Thank you, Simone.
Yeah.
God bless you. Thank you. And all of you on that. Ian.
Well, I think we've kind of almost come to a place of landing. So I thought, unless there are other quick comments to close, that I would just end our discussion with some more words from "This Is the Moment" song, because this is the moment. So here we go, the last couple of verses. This is the moment, this is the hour, when I can open tomorrow like a flower. And with my hand to everything that I've planned, I can fulfill my grand design, and to see all my stars align. This is the moment, my final test. This is the moment when all I've done, all of the dreaming, scheming and screaming have become one, because this is the day, just let it shine, when all I've lived for becomes mine. So I wish you all well in your moment and in the moments that flow from here. And Susan, thank you so much for being our special guest today in what we call Sparkination Conversations. A Sparkination is a spark that ignites passion, that leads to action, that changes what's normal. And Susan, you've sparkinated us today.
I'm so pleased, Ian. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And thank you so much to all. It's been a pleasure to look into your heart, even if it's via a screen. And of course, we have a recording, which I'm just going to end now to stop that recording. But thank you so much all for joining. And Susan and I will just wait online for a moment or two if you've got any questions you'd like to ask. But I'm just going to stop the recording.
Ian, and I'll just speak to your flower and say to you all, a flower gives unto itself, whether it's appreciated or not. So a flower blooms every day, whether it's appreciated or not. Thank you.